Jamila Salmore was influenced by the dancers from the 1930s and 40s, and her movement came out of that era. Jamila was a nightclub dancer. She was a nightclub owner. She was the first woman to own an Arabic nightclub on the West Coast. My mother loves Arabic music, and to this day she will say, and she feels very, very strongly about this, that if you're not dancing to Arabic music, well, you're just not belly dancing. My mom and I sometimes disagree about this point, but I completely love Arabic music, and I understand where she's coming from, because this was her love, and this was, and it is, the culture and the music where these movements have all come from. My mother danced in the nightclubs, and even before then, she danced at every opportunity that was given to her to actually perform. There were no nightclubs when my mother was dancing, and then when nightclubs actually were birthed in this country, she ended up dancing in nightclubs, but by this time she was in her 30s. It wasn't until the late 60s when she created Ball and Knot for the Renaissance Pleasure Fair that my mom began using the word tribal. Until this time, there was no separation. You didn't use the word cabaret and you didn't use the word tribal. You were just a belly dancer and you did it all. So what defined a look, a feel, or a stylization was the environment of the show. The time of the show. Was it a day show, an evening show? Was it a family show? Or was it a nightclub? And this really created the look, the feel, the costuming, the energy. My mother was trying to justify belly dance at the Renaissance Fair, so she created this incredible tribal fantasy that was always presented as a performing art hokum. That was even the word that she would use. It's hokum. And it was all her idea and fantasy. But the truth is, my mother was always inspired by Arabic music. She wanted to represent and appreciate and respect the culture. She created the costumes from Ball and Knot out of photos from the National Geographics that she had lying around the house. She wanted to make sure that even though she was taking creative liberties in her choreographies and in the presentation of Ball and Knot, that it was out of paintings, poetry, or these magazines. She was trying to get whatever she could to represent the culture because there was nothing available. But all of the dancers in Ball and Knot, in the daytime, they put on their tribal costumes, and at night, they put on their cabaret costumes and they were working in nightclubs. There was no division in the community, and the vocabulary of movements were all the same, just very slight variations of movement and stylization based on the music and the vibe and the costuming. But the vocabulary of dance was all Jamila Salmore format, which came out of the heyday of the golden era from the 1940s of those cabaret dancers. I remember when I had started working in nightclubs, I was interviewed by somebody who was doing a piece on the Salimpour legacy, and this woman asked me, when did I decide to be a cabaret dancer? And I was so offended at the time because I never called myself a tribal or a cabaret dancer. I'm very proud to be a Salimpour. I'm Jamila Salimpour's daughter, so I hold very close to my heart the concepts of tribal and what my mother created. And I was also a working dancer and felt very privileged that right after high school I was able to go right into working in nightclubs, and I was working with the top bands and the most incredible musicians coming out of the Middle East. And I was asked, when did I decide to be a cabaret dancer? I never decided to be anything one or the other. I was and still am a dancer. If you lived in America, you were touched by Jamila Salimpour. If you were a dancer on the West Coast, you were not just influenced by Jamila Salmore, you were probably doing her format, even if you didn't know. Many of my mother's students broke off from the school and actually started teaching on their own. And those teachers then had students, and those students had students. And later on, the term tribal or ATS was birthed out of teachers being students of Jamila Salimpour. So the Jamila Salmore format was the foundation for her students to go out and teach, and that morphed into movements that later became associated with tribal ATS or tribal fusion. But the Jamila Salmore format was birthed out of the golden era, that time and movement form of the top dancers from the 1940s, Badia Masabni, Tahia Carioca, and they were cabaret dancers. So the movements were very much associated with the top dancers coming out of Egypt at that time. So the foundation of what became tribal or ATS or tribal fusion is truly Jamila Salimpour format. Tribal fusion was later evolved out of students that came out of the Suhaila Salimpour format, incorporating all the hard contraction isolation movements created in the late 70s and 80s. And so the Suhaila Salimpour format is now associated with tribal fusion movements. Jamila and Suhaila Salimpour are both nightclub dancers, and their movements and their musicality and how they represent Arabic music is still with all of those steps and all of the isolations. If you have a good dance foundation first, you can do anything that you want. You can make artistic choices, but do any stylization that you want. This workshop is to focus on technique, so you can build the foundation of your movement, safety, and posture, and then later you're able to make artistic and creative choices. I want you to be able to do it all. I want you to be able to grow and evolve through the years with a strong foundation of technique. So as you change, as you grow, as you move forward in different tastes of music or style, that your body and your movement will be able to move and evolve with you.